So yeah, so that today's discussion will be about advantages and disadvantages of command economy. Remember, command economy is one where resources are owned by the government. The government is allocating these resources, and they are doing so in order to maximize social welfare. So the government is the one that owns all the factors of production. There's no private sector. There's no private ownership as a result, and therefore the government is the only owner of factors of production. So what are the advantages when you have government as the only owner of factors of production and therefore only party that is allocated resources? Well, one of the biggest advantage we feel is that the allocation of resources can happen in accordance with specific national goals. So one of the biggest advantage we can say is this, that the government can take into account the national goals. Let's say the national goal is economic growth, or let's say the national goal is to increase employment, or the national goal is to control demand even. So they can look at the national goals and then they can allocate resources accordingly. So it could, for example, achieve high economic growth rates by directing large amounts into investment. So one big advantage we believe that happens in a command economy is this, that the government plans and therefore national goals can be met. So that's one big advantage. Make sense? Any questions before we move on? So moving on, the second thing we need to understand is just that because the government is deciding the allocation resources, we also believe the government can, for example, distribute resources in an equal manner. This is an important criticism that we saw happen in a free market economy, where some people could have more sovereignty than others. So in this economic system, there will be more equal distribution of resources. Why? Or if not equal, in accordance with the needs of people. So for example, if you have a family of 4, they may get a bigger house than a family of 2. Makes sense? So distribution of resources can be in accordance with consumer need, rather than basically some people will have more than the others. So there is more equal distribution of wealth. Distribution of wealth and resources. Make sense? The third important point to understand is just that in this economic system, you could, for example, allocate resources in a manner that you look at the production requirements and labor skill, and therefore you could make sure that the macroeconomic goal, like for example, unemployment, could be avoided, because the government carefully plans the allocation of resources. So the important sort of point here to remember is that the government can plan better and avoid unemployment and other macro problems, because the government is going to look at what the production requirements are, what the labor skills are, and can do a good job. In a free market economy, we saw that there could be issues of macroeconomic instability that can happen. Remember, the macroeconomic instability could be long lasting because there's no government to make or channel things or organize things to begin with. Are we good? So that's the third one. Is there any question before we move on? The fourth sort of advantage, and this is a big advantage, is this, that remember, in a free market economy, we saw issues of merit goods. Remember, we saw issues of public goods like street light and national defense. We saw issues of externalities, the negative externalities, which was a third party cost like pollution and all that. We also saw demerit goods, right? Merit, all of these were happening in a free market economy because it was unchecked. There was no government. But in a command economy, the social repercussion or social, what we say, consequences of production and consumption can all be taken into account, and you can avoid them by making sure that um, you you control the production processes. You don't dump the waste in the river. If people need national defense or street light, or for example any public good, you provide that. You have merit goods easily accessible, and wherever possible control demerit goods and so on. So the government can take into account the social repercussions and basically make sure that they are avoided by the government. So in a way, the allocation of resources, if somebody asks us, the allocation of resources, we can say, okay, we can make sure the national goals are met. We can make sure the macro stability is taken into account. We can make sure resources are equally distributed, and we can make sure any social repercussions that we otherwise see in free market economy can be avoided in the command economy. So this brings us to the disadvantages of command economy. Uh, the biggest disadvantage of command economy is this idea of planning for the whole economy. Suddenly, you're not planning for some people, you're planning for the whole economy, which means the larger and more complex the economy, which means the bigger the economy, the greater will be the task of collecting and analyzing the information. You are looking at collecting data for, let's say, such a huge population of, let's say, Pakistan. This means that, and why are you collecting information? Because you want to make a plan for them. You need to exactly know what they want. So you need to make a plan for them in terms of how many shirts they want, how many sort of milk they want, how much tea they want, how much, all the things that they're requiring, they want. And therefore you're collecting a lot of information, and then you're analyzing them, which is basically, and making a plan out of it. And so the larger the economy, the more complex will be the plan. And the more complex the plan, the more people you need, which means complicated plans will be very, very costly. You need a lot of people to make those plans and to administer those plans, which means you're looking at cumbersome economy. Cumbersome economy basically means heavy or expensive bureaucracy. Bureaucracy means heavy government sort of presence. Make sense? So the idea is this, that in a command economy, since everything depends on planning, then this means the larger you are looking into the size of the economy, the more planning. In fact, one of the reasons why command economy lost sort of to mixed economy is the idea that the plans were so complex that they were bound to go wrong. There were always issue of too many people making a plan for an economy, and nothing happened automatically. If you look at command versus free market economy, free market economy works automatically. So there's no costly or cumbersome bureaucracy required. But in a command economy, it doesn't really happen automatically, which means you have challenges of this that can happen. Make sense? Are we good? Questions, guys? To add to this point, guys, also the fact that now the government is making plans, there is no automatic demand supply price mechanism, which means now the government is basically going to rely on their own judgment, right? If there are no system of prices, prices are set arbitrarily by the state. Arbitrary means at their own will. This means at their own will. If they're making a plan at their own will, then this means that if this planning will require, planning can go wrong. There could be issues of shortages. There could be issues of surpluses. For example, if you're setting a price, and if the price is too high, then nobody's going to buy. Then this means you will have a surplus. And if the price is too low, then you will have a shortage, which means we can get the allocation of resources wrong because we don't have the prices to guide us. Price serves as a very powerful tool in a free market economy, because a high price signals producers to produce more, a low price signals the producer to produce less. Make sense? So in this economic system, you don't have the prices to guide you, which means you can get the pricing wrong, which means you could under or overproduce and that could be bad planning in terms of resource allocation. Um, the next point, which is that in this economic system, we also will see that unlike in a free market economy, everyone is trying to maximize their self interest, right? Everything was driven by self interest. Like you do well, you get more money, more profits, and so on. In this economic system, it is difficult to devise appropriate incentive. It's going to be very challenging for us to devise the right kind of incentive for workers and managers to be more productive. You don't get bonuses to be more productive, or you don't get very high salaries to get productive. So uh, when you want more output, probably you will end up reducing quality because there will always be a trade-off. Unlike in a free market economy, everyone is working to make sure the quality is high. Everyone is working to make sure that they stay relevant in the market. There is more innovation happening, and so on and so forth. You might not see the same thing happening in this economic system because the incentive structures are not there to begin with. The incentive structure of maximizing self-interest is a very powerful way to get more quality, to get lower prices, to get more profits, and so on and so forth in an economic system. Make sense? So in this economic system, we also believe that because there are no incentives, people are not driven by self-interest, you might have issues of quality, you might have issues of productivity, you might have more inefficiency to begin with because no one is held accountable to produce more or to produce better. Make sense? Are we good? So this is the third point. Do we have any questions before we move on? Another important point that we believe that happens is this, that in a command economy, because you have the government controlling the allocation of resources, there's also a problem that government basically takes away the free enterprise aspect. Remember the free enterprise? Free enterprise was your will to decide what to buy or your will to allocate the resources according to your will, your need, or your desire. The fact that the government has a complete control over resource allocation, which means that let's say if I want to be a teacher, I want to teach economics, I may not be able to do so because the government may not allow me. The government may say, hey, the economy needs you to produce more, for example, washing machines. So even if I want to teach economics, I may not be able to do so because I would be asked to make washing machine, which is in line with the need of consumers. So in line with the need of the economy. So there is a considerable loss of what we call individual liberty. Individual means liberty means your choice is no longer with you. So people like consumers, producers, the workers have to comply to what the government is saying and not have to and they cannot do what they want to do and how they want to sort of allocate their resources. So in this economic system, in short, we have no free enterprise, which could be problematic. Lastly, to add to the point number 4, the government can also basically end up enforcing plans even if they are unpopular. The government doesn't really care about popularity to begin with. What they care about is basically what is good for society. Even if it's unpopular, they may go about doing that. A good example of this is that China's one-child policy, if you remember, came in the 1970s and stayed for a good 15 years where the government forced people to have only one child. And if you had more than one child, either you were fined or you were punished for that fact. In fact, they actually also went with forced sterilization for a lot more people in order to make sure the one child policy is enacted, so is followed. So that is an example of how a very unpopular plan, which took away the civil liberty or individual liberty, was put into place because the government's idea or notion was that this could be good for the society. Make sense? So this is a challenge of, this is the drawback of a command economy as well. They don't work for what is a popular opinion because it's not relevant for them to, or it's not important for them to do so. They look at what they define as to be the social welfare of the society. So let's discuss this question since we have no questions, which is that discuss whether resources are more effectively allocated in a planned economy. Are they more effectively allocated in a planned economy or in a market economy? Okay, so that's the question that we need to ask, whether resources are allocated more efficiently in a planned economy or in a market economy. So guys, the way we will write that answer for this one is basically we'll define our free market economy or market economy, and then also we can define command economy. Okay, so first paragraph would be free market economy is one where they are government owned. There is no government or very limited role of government. Everything is owned by individuals, and therefore there is private sector and no public sector. While in a command economy, resources are owned completely by the government. So in a command economy, the government decides what, how, and for whom to produce. While in a free market economy, this question is answered by the private sector. Then we talk about basically how are resources allocated in a command. So let's talk about how resources are allocated. Wrong color, let me choose another color. How resources are allocated. So in a command economy, resources are allocated through planning, right? The government can set the prices, and there could be both advantages and disadvantages of that. So we can talk about how resources are allocated and what are the pros and or cons of it, or strengths and weaknesses of it. Okay, I'll come to this in 1 minute. It's the same thing we'll do for free market as well. So my second and third paragraph would be about one for command. So this first one will be for command and the second one will be for free market. We saw in a command economy, if I go back to this question, guys, if I go back to our text, we saw this, guys, that in a command economy, the government is basically allocating resources according to the national goals. So we talk about the government is deciding according to national goals. The government, for example, can distribute or allocate resources in a manner that they look at the macroeconomic goals and try to be as efficient as possible. If they plan better, they can reduce issues of unemployment and other challenges. And also in this economic system, because of the fact the government is allocating resources, you might see a better allocation of resources in terms of the negative externalities, public goods, and merit/demerit goods, right? But disadvantages are also going to be mentioned in the same sort of paragraph. I'll say this, that because the government is planning, there could be issues that the plans could be inefficient. There could be a very cumbersome bureaucracy, and the prices that are being set can be too high or too low, and that can result in basically issues of basically shortages and surpluses that can come about. And lastly, because there are no proper incentives to begin with, you could have issues of quality and productivity. So there could be lack of self-interest can take that. So the allocation can go wrong as well, depending on bad plans and so on. On the other hand, when you look at free market economy, we say this has also big advantages, that it works automatically. It's very quick to respond. The private sector, because there's competition, you will see more efficiency. You may see lower prices. You may see also innovation to happen because people are motivated through self-interest. But in a free market economy, sometimes we can see monopoly to happen. Sometimes we can see high profits and high prices and exploitation of consumers to happen. Also, the fact that in a free market economy, you may have negative externalities, merit and demerit goods under and over provided, and public goods to be not there to begin with. And lastly, because there is no government, there could be issues where you might see a macroeconomic instability to begin with. Okay, so that's my answer, but there is one thing which I want to talk about, which is the conclusion. What conclusion should we give for this question? Because my answer will give me this answer, guys, will give me this answer will give me whatever I've talked about will give me 8 marks plus 4 marks for conclusion. The conclusion can be basically you talking about both economic systems have its pros and cons. However, in recent times, we've seen a shift towards more towards free market economy. A lot of economies are moving away from command towards free market economy, or closer towards free market economy, which means it's mixed economy. And the reason is because in a command economy, when you are making a plan for the whole economy, there are a lot more difficulties that come about. While the command economy, in its essence, is it's a noble idea where resources are allocated in an equal manner. However, the task of planning makes it really challenging for the government to get it right, and that in itself results in the economy to economic system to fail. Make sense? So that could be the answer for this one. A 12-mark question basically means 24 minutes. So in 24 minutes, definitely you're writing more than a page. So you need to remember that. Normally, don't look at how much you write, look at the timing allotted to it and whether you are doing justice by giving all the points or not. Okay, so that's more important. So your conclusion can be different conclusion. My conclusion is that I am preferring free market over command because of the planning issues. And I'm saying this, that what is seen is that a lot of countries are going towards command economy, moving away from command economy because of this challenge. So that's what my conclusion is. Make sense?